Hello, and welcome to another episode of Somewhat Accurate History, a podcast where we vaguely remember the history of various countries. Apparently, Wales is not a country.
Hey people, Tad here. No, they're gonna steal the Seth opening. Hey, and welcome to another episode of Somewhat Accurate History. This one's another Tad edition, baby. How many have we done? I think this will be my third, and I think you've done like 4 or 5.
I have done a lot of history episodes, actually. Because we're counting the mythology ones, too, because I guess it's just what we are now. We're just talking about this random bullshit now.
Yeah, I mean, the ratio's not that bad. So maybe I should stop and like making it like a big deal when I do it. So, Alex, this is another classic scenario where I chose a person just like the John Wilkes Booth, where I chose a guy, did it, had everything done, and then I found a single sentence on a different resource that just blew the whole thing wide open. And I had to redo like the entire fucking thing. So, Alex, I'm going to tell you about Joshua Norton, who's also known as the Emperor of the United States and the Protector of Mexico.
Alright, so I immediately have some questions about this.
First thing, though, this is actually a fan-suggested topic. I got an email from Max Pitchkites. I don't know why that was so hard to say. But he emailed me this. He's like, hey, check out this goober. And I was like, okay, thanks. And then I blocked him.
Nice!
I actually did block him, and then I had to unblock him because I clicked on the wrong spot.
Nice.
I'm sorry, Max.
Treating our fans with the respect they deserve for listening to this pee-pee poo-poo podcast. I'm funny.
Right, so, Alex, Joshua Norton. So this dude, he's the Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. Anyway, he's born in England.
Alright, off to a good start.
So he was born in England in 1818, which is not very long after the French Revolution ended. Also, real quick, another side diversion. Someone pointed out in the Adolf Sachs episode that there wasn't just one French Revolution. I guess I just assumed there was only one because I'm a dumb idiot American. But there's a bunch of them that spanned over like 80 years or something.
There was a bunch of them. That's one way to put it.
But that series of political spaghetti like kind of wrapped up in 1799, right at the start of the 1800s. So Norton was born pretty close to that. And as such, it was really common for people around that time zone to say they were secret royalty or that they knew someone who was slumming it to avoid the guillotine and shit. Norton's only in London for like a little bit. His family moves to South Africa as part of a British colonizing effort, and they're given a bunch of land to form like a town and do all this shit.
All right.
The most famous British colony in Africa is Cape Town. You might have heard of that one.
Yes, actually. Isn't it still time today?
Yes. And when you Google it and check their tourism, it is 100% white people, except for the local customs and culture section. So, oof, yikes.
Ooh.
So England is colonizing South Africa because they had to go all the fucking way down and around Africa to go to India. They're like, well, let's get some people down there so that, we have resupplying and things like that.
Yeah, you have a stopping point, a checkpoint, if you will.
Yeah, and it's not like anyone in Africa is going to be able to fucking stop them. Like, there's no government there that's going to be like, hey, sir, we're going to need you to... They basically played it the same way that we treated the Native Americans.
They just put their fucking boots down, held their arms out and said, what are you going to do about it?
Here's a fun fact. Ethiopia is the only country in Africa that was never conquered or made part of any colony. And you know how great Ethiopia is. So.
I didn't want to say it. I was thinking about it. That's why I was paused right there. I didn't want to make a snide comment because I would have felt bad. But yeah, pretty much.
So if you're a colonizer, you get some land, and if everyone worked together, you made a real colony, and it's cultivated, and by golly, that's worth a lot in like 50 years. So it turns out the land they were given fucking sucked. Like, it was basically a dirt farm. There was nothing that could grow there.
I don't think back then they even really knew how like fertile like land worked. Did they in the 1800s? Did they know how to power game the system like we do now with farming?
Not as much. It's actually really funny because now the same area is like a hot spot for farming because now we know how to actually make it workable. But
Yeah.
back then it was just fucking dirt and sand. They had no idea what to do with it. So they just moved to Grahamstown. Like they just leave everything there and move like they were like 300 miles to another colony. So Joshua Norton grows up in Africa with 6 siblings. You know, just all of them getting bitten by malaria mosquitoes and being attacked by crocodiles. But Norton, you know, he miraculously survives living close. No, he's not close to the Nile. But, you know, Africa's not like a cool place to grow up in. But there's a little tidbit. His childhood isn't really that exciting. But one of his schoolmates, he tells him that he is the crown prince to the throne of France and that he's the son of Louis XIII and Marie Antoinette. And then shows him like an 1828 silver franc to say, like, yeah, see, this is my proof. And he always had that franc on his person for the rest of his life. So he got started on this shit early.
Yeah, all right.
But he's just like a normal kid now. He's just like, he was telling that kid how to get Goku in Smash Bros.
Pretty much. I assume he's bullshitting, right?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Just making sure.
So when he's 21, he goes up to his father, looks him right in the eye, gives him a firm handshake, and his dad gives him $1 million to go into business.
Wait, how old is he again? Easy.
21.
Okay. I thought he was
we're
still
just jumping ahead.
I thought he was still 10 for a second. I got confused.
So he uses his father's connections and his own wits and a small loan of $1 million to form Joshua Norton and Company Shipping. It goes bankrupt in 18 months.
Nice.
So when I was researching this, there was a letter from Norton's father that he writes to his oldest son, Louis, because there's Louis and then Joshua and then his 4 other siblings. And let me just read it verbatim here. Your brother Joshua has been the ruin of all the family. He has no compassion or remorse. I am more like a dead man than anything else. Yours in affliction, John Norton. So Norton just pissed away all of his family's money. And so he goes, well, moves back with his parents and they move to Cape Town, which is like another 1,000 miles west. And this time he's moving there so he can apprentice under his father, which he probably should have done before his dad just gave him all the money. So things go pretty, they're fine for a little bit, and then things go downhill. In 1846, his older brother Louis dies. Later that year, his mom dies.
Oof.
Then his younger brother dies the next year. And the year after that, his father dies.
Alright, so going full Ivan the Terrible. Every one of his family member dies back to back.
Yep, so within 2 years, lost both parents and a third of his siblings. So now Norton's the oldest surviving son, so he's the inheritor of his father's estate. Which at that time was basically nothing, because, to quote his father again, I am totally ruined and lost. I have not one penny in the world. So, 1849, Norton takes what remains of the family fortune and leaves Africa. And I guess he just left his siblings in there? They never show up again in his story. I couldn't find anything about what happened to his family. So I think he just left them in Africa.
Okay, bye.
Like he just pieced out. So he doesn't go directly to San Francisco. He goes to Rio de Janeiro. He goes to South America. And there's a bunch of people are like, how did he get the money? Is it inheritance? And they tried to like pick through the finances to find it. So no one really knows exactly how he got his money. But they're pretty sure he goes to South America and then actually does pretty well, does successful, builds up a bunch of money, like for a few months there. And then he goes to San Francisco with a nest egg of like 40 grand, which is like $250,000 in today's money.
How the fuck did he get that money? What was he doing down in Rio de Janeiro?
No one knows. I mean, maybe he actually figured out. He's like, oh, this is how you do it, and you don't bankrupt your company.
Maybe he just fucking stole it.
That's legit one of the things people like, maybe he just embezzled it from his dad. Because his dad was saying that Norton was like a little shithead, so he very well could have just been stealing. So he gets on this boat called the Francisca to go to the United States, and there's an interview one of the newspapers did with the captain of that boat, who said that Norton, as a grown-ass, like, 23-year-old man, would play little devilish pranks on people on the boat. classic, hilarious pranks like spilling someone's beer and standing in a coil of rope when they fire the harpoon. So I guess he just like gets his leg caught and goes, "Whoa," and then cracks his head on something. Like, I don't see the point of that goof. I don't understand that bit, but he did it. He arrives and he gets to San Francisco, and somehow he convinces this guy, Peter Robertson, to give him a bunch of money and to open up a shipping business. I don't know how he did it. He must have been like a real fast talker. He bamboozles the guy. And Norton gets set up as a commission merchant, which means he evaluates goods that come in, gives the people a price, finds a buyer, takes his cut.
I just
And it fucking works.
I was to say, because it worked so well the first time.
He did what I did back on Dat Stream, where people would sell their TF2 items. I would take their items in, let them know, hey, this is worth about 10 keys. I will find a buyer for this, and I will take 2 keys out of the profit for you. There you go. I mean, he did the same thing I did.
Cashing in on lazy people.
Exactly. Then Norton gets a Jimmy Neutron brain blast. So he takes his money. He doesn't spend it on anything. He saves it up, and buys a bunch of land. And some specific land that he buys is on 2 sides of this waterway. He buys this old pirate ship, tears down the mast, puts a roof over it, and converts it into a big old floating warehouse. People come in this waterway, unload all their shit onto this big boat, and then they just swoop back around, and on the other side, they can load it up, and, he can sell it like that. It's super efficient. They just come in one way, other boats come in one way, load it, unload it, easy peasy. You don't have to bring it onto land and then put it back on another boat. It just goes from boat to boat.
That's a smart idea, actually.
So then he's doing well. He starts diversifying. He builds a rice mill. He puts up some office and retail stores and buys up a bunch more property in the bay.
He's getting a lot of fucking money.
This bay area, this is going to be worth a lot of money in the future. He also builds a Norton and Company Imperial Cigars. Imperial is an important word. So he's making smart investments. He's doing great. His family back home is probably dying, but he's got cigars and rice and pirate ships. He's fine.
Okay, so how long was this since he got here? Like, what's the time frame of him becoming the success story?
Like 3 years. Like he immediately started doing really well.
Damn, that's a lot better than being the ruin of your entire family. Too bad everyone died before they could see you succeed.
Like, he's in there counting his money, like, flicking through his bills, and his family back home is just like a squat little cottage covered in mosquitoes with a crocodile on the roof. So he's doing well. He's getting to be a bigwig. He's drinking and smoking cigars with the hoity-toity important people, getting invited to parties, staying at the best hotels, eating the best food in town. He starts dabbling in like city administration and civic stuff and joins the Committee of Vigilance, which is like an old-timey neighborhood watch. So the Committee of Vigilance, their method of solving crimes is, hey, you're guilty of a crime. Blam, blam, 2 in the dome.
Oh, okay. So not too much different from what we do now.
Yeah. And then Norton was like, yo, okay, consider this, guys. Maybe let them give a legal defense? And they're like, not a bad idea. So, 1852, he makes one single mistake. So China was undergoing a famine, if you could believe that. And suddenly they stopped exporting all of their rice. No more exports of rice. It was going for 36 cents a pound, which now would be, even right now, 36 cents a pound for rice is kind of like, that's kind of a lot. When you think about how much rice gets used. So Norton gets approached to corner the market and buy a fuckload of kind of bad quality jasmine rice from Peru for 12 cents a pound. His eyes turned like the big cartoon dollar signs, cha-ching, and he drops a shitload of money and then gets a bunch of other people to give him money, and he signs a contract to buy X amount of rice over this amount of time for 12 cents a pound. The next day after he signs the contract, a ship full of Peruvian rice comes in the harbor. Norton's like, all right, not a big deal. It's fine. Just one more. Just one boat. I got like 10 coming in.
Oh, no.
The next day, 3 arrive. And then the next day, even more.
So everyone was doing this Peruvian shit.
They weren't even trying to corner it. The ships were just too slow. And he jumped too fast. So every day over the next 2 weeks, more and more ships come in with rice. rice that is not only not his, but objectively higher quality. His rice, like the price of rice in general, crashes to 3 cents a pound,
Oh,
and he has to keep buying it at 12 cents, and no one wants his shitty rice if they can get good rice for 3 cents. Like, you gonna sell it for 2 cents? That's 30% cheaper. You're fucking yourself really hard. So he is fucking freaking. He panics and he gets into this long legal battle saying he was misled to the quality of the rice. You know, he wins in the lower courts, but then the Supreme Court decides, nah, dude, he signed a contract. You get fucked.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it's true.
yeah, so 1852, he buys the rice. 1855, he has to sell all of his business properties, and his warehouse boat is destroyed and taken to the dump. And he's completely fucked. He's completely broke.
Just with how much rice did he fucking buy?
An insane amount, because rice is so important. And he's like, I'm just gonna buy all this. I'm gonna be able to sell this shit. It's gonna be done. I'm gonna be moving it out. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. And then it didn't work.
But he seemed to have so many business prospects going. How the fuck? How much? I'm just thinking of him in this big massive warehouse with just boxes of fucking rice everywhere.
He's sitting on like a throne that's just made out of rice, angry, looking like that one picture of Conan the Barbarian, the Rice King.
Like, fuck, that's a lot of rice. I really just can't get over how much. Okay, so let's say he had $1 million. He had another $1 million coming in tomorrow. He's gonna spend all $2 million of those dollars on rice.
You're goddamn right, dude. Because here's the thing about San Francisco and the entire West Coast. There's a lot of Chinese people there. And this isn't like a racy thing or anything. It's just legitimately rice is eaten by shit. I almost said rice is eaten by normal people and Chinese people. That would have sounded fucked up.
Nice.
No. Everyone eats rice, and with the prevalence of Chinese people on the West Coast, that's even more rice. So he's like, yeah, smart investment. But he loses everything. So that was 55. And then he just secludes himself. He's no longer living in these nice buildings. He's in like these shitty 50 cent a day boarding houses.
50 cents a day?
Yeah, he locks himself out. He just disappears for like 4 years. No one ever sees him. Some people thought he left the city, but I read there's a really cool website. I'll have it in the sources that has like everything about Emperor Norton. They even have like a Google map where you could click around the world and see the spots he was at. If you zoom in really close at his old home, you could just see a smoldering crater full of mosquitoes.
You're really harping on these mosquitoes, ain't you?
So, September 17th, 1859, the San Francisco Evening Bulletin receives a letter, and because it was a different time, I guess they just publish it unedited. Like, they just publish this crazy person's letter. I'm going to paraphrase it, but I'm going to read it, pretty close to exactly what it said. At the request of a large majority of the citizens of these United States, I, Joshua Norton, formerly of the Cape of Good Hope, and now for 9 years and 10 months a citizen of San Francisco, declare myself Emperor of these United States, and in virtue of the authority vested in me, do hereby order the representatives of the different states of the Union to assemble in Musical Hall of this city on February 1st, to make such alterations in the existing laws of the Union as may ameliorate the evils under which the country is laboring, and therefore cause confidence to exist in our stability and integrity. Signed, Emperor Norton I, Emperor of the United States. He didn't have the Protector of Mexico until 1863, when Napoleon III just tried to steal a bunch of silver from Mexico.
Okay, so out of nowhere he just fucking announces with like a megaphone that he's the emperor now.
Yes, he just one day he sends in a letter, and wham bam, thank you ma'am, he is now the Emperor of the United States.
So how legal was this in the 1800s?
Listen, it's not illegal to be crazy.
Okay,
except yes, it technically is, because he did get arrested for being literally just being crazy.
All right.
But
I guess a better question I would like to ask would be, how the fuck? Okay, did anyone listen? Did anyone actually like agree and just say, "Oh yeah, sure, he's the emperor now"? I guess. Like, how much ground did he have to stand on?
So, no one looked to him as any oh, this is legit the president. Like, people weren't following his orders, but they also kind of were. Like, his power became real. So Norton was in action now. he would furiously draft up these proclamations and send them to the newspapers to print them to his adoring public. Because originally, it's like, what's a good example?
He's in San
Okay,
Francisco still, right?
yes.
Okay.
Okay, Alex, do you remember Billy MC from the Retsu Prey
Yes,
videos?
actually, I do.
This guy is Billy MC, where the first video was the slow beef and diabetes just making fun of him for being a weirdo. But then they kept going back to his videos. So like, you know what, Billy MC, I like you. You got a positive attitude, and I enjoy your videos. Like, genuinely became fans of Billy MC. That's what happened with Emperor Norton. Because his proclamations that he would put out, people were like, you know what, this guy's got it. Like, this guy's kind of got it, dude. So I'm gonna give you some of the things that he said and like laws that he demanded be put into place. So the one that's the most like legit, because a lot of these actually did happen, but the one that a lot of people push for is that he demanded the construction of a bridge between San Francisco and Oakland Bays, and a tunnel be made underneath it. And this is in the 1800s, so people just kind of went like, "This would be incredibly useful, and we definitely should have this. We should put the research to it." But they didn't have the technology yet. And then in the 1900s, they did exactly that. Like, they built the bridge. They did exactly what he said.
Damn.
Like, 1-to-1. They built a tunnel underneath it. They did everything. It was like 1936 they built the bridge, and then 74 with the tunnel underneath it. So he advocated for a universal religion and the abolishment of Sunday laws, which are laws that are like, you can't work on a Sunday, which sounds based, but let's say that you aren't Catholic and you need to work and support your family, and there's a law that says for some arbitrary reason that you can't get paid on Sunday. You're like, fuck that, I need to work. So he's like, hey, get rid of those. Those are horse shit. In 1865, the Civil War ended, and Norton said, whereas the American nation, having acknowledged the citizenship of the colored people, their children are entitled to admission in the public schools. So he advocated for, don't separate schools, don't separate public transportation. He supported women's suffrage and the idea that Chinese people should be allowed to testify in court.
They weren't able to.
Dude, they hated the Chinese.
All right,
like,
let me hear something out of it. So what you're saying is that this guy is a time traveler, was just trying to make the 1800s catch up to the 1900s.
I think he's a time traveler that like went too far back to like Napoleon. Was like, oh shit, I should be an like, okay, he's from the year 2020, but we went so high in years that it like ticked back over, like we got an overflow error. So he's been like, an entire universe and then also 2020 years. And so he's like, oh, I should go back. He's like, oh, fuck, emperors. That's a really cool idea. And then went back forward to the correct time. And now he's just stuck here. And it's so far in the future, Time Squad can't get him. There was this time where a mob was going to lynch a Chinese man. And Norton remember, this is mid 1800s.
Yeah.
Norton got between the mob and the Chinese man, and he was just shouting the Lord's Prayer again and again and again until the crowd dispersed in shame.
So Norton is basically a hero right now, is what I'm getting from this. He sounds like a good guy. No wonder people are starting to like him.
Yeah, like, you live in a shitty time period. This is after the 49ers, where like a bunch of people came out to get gold, and the majority of them became penniless because of it. So you got this dude that's like, he's doing good shit. By the way, the West Coast, the reason they were super anti-Chinese was because many, many Chinese people immigrated to the US to help make the railroads in the West and then stayed there. And then, people, if they're living in shitty times, they will push it on to someone who has a different colored skin and blame it on them, and that. Another really good law he had was anyone who committed fraud or a crime against any Indian tribes were to be publicly punished before as many Indian chiefs as possible.
Damn.
Which is like, all right, listen, I get what you're going for, but that's a little weird, but I appreciate it. I like it. Fair taxes based on income and maintained like upkeep public transportation and public welfare. And my favorite one, and this is hotly debated within the Nortonhead community if he actually said it or not. I'm going to read the quote. Whoever, after due and proper warning, shall be heard to utter the abominable word Frisco, which has no linguistic or other warrant, shall be deemed guilty of a high misdemeanor, and shall pay into the Imperial Treasury as penalty the sum of $25.
What the fuck does Frisco mean?
A Frisco is a type of sandwich where it's got like meat and like toast and tomato and like a weird sauce. You can get it at like Hardee's and shit.
Okay. So I was with him up till now. Where the fuck did this come up? So at first I thought he was a time traveler. Now I think he might just be insane. He's a broken clock that was right 2 times a day, but he had like 6 dials, so he was right like 6 times. But then there's just the 7th hand here.
See, like I said, that is hotly debated within the Nortonhead community. I read a very long and very boring article where someone was fucking furious that someone quoted that quote without a source and was like furiously trying to disprove it, but then he had to like kind of give up and say it could have happened. So Alex, let me give you a day in the life of the Emperor of the United States. So he wakes up in his dingy, like 9-foot by 6-foot boarding house room.
Oh, he's still living there?
Yep, he lives in the boarding house room. You know, he lived there until the day he died. But he'd wake up, he would get dressed, and I'll get into his outfit in a little bit here.
Oh, I don't like the sound of that.
He would read like every newspaper in the city. He'd go to lunch at whatever restaurant tickled his fancy, usually for free, because whenever he showed up, he'd bring like a gaggle of people. And he would literally do the Commander Shepard thing. This is my favorite restaurant in the city. And they'd give him free food and shit.
All right.
So, wakes up, reads the newspapers, goes to whatever, like, he could, like, upscale restaurants, like, legit-ass places. Then he'd go to some of these lodge, like the Masonic Lodge, and smoke some cigars, finish his newspapers, or work on his royal decrees. Then in the afternoon, he'd go to the public debates and argue his policies to the crowd. So, also, he didn't have a job.
I was about to ask, where's he getting this 50 cents a day thing?
So the 50 cents a day would be paid by members of the Masonic Lodge, and then eventually the city itself would set aside an ordinance to pay for his clothing and his housing.
Only 50 cents a day, though, so I can't imagine. I imagine they did because it was just so easy.
I mean, 50 cents a day. Remember, 50 cents is like a lot.
Oh yeah, this is before all the inflation. You're right. I didn't even think about that.
This is mid 1800s, so 50 cents a day is like, I think it's like $100.
Oh.
So, his outfit, he would have this knobbly little cane, a beaver hat with a really tall ostrich feather, and a sword. And as his notoriety increased, he would have Union soldiers who gave him a gold and blue uniform. And when that got too ratty, some Confederate soldiers gave him his grays. And then when those were torn up, the nearby army base would give him more military fatigues. So when he'd get invited to one of the many balls and formal events he attended, he would add golden pauldrons to his outfit and a rose on his lapel that would be given to him by a fan every day.
Is he still wearing the beaver hat at this ball?
Yes.
So I imagine he looks like he's a Monster Hunter clown suit. He's maximizing his stats, not his fashion.
He's got like this mess of hair and this giant beard that like mutton chops connects to the huge beard too. So he looks like a crazy man, but he carries himself well. So Norton did have to make a living somehow for like his bills and shit, right?
Yes.
He couldn't always rely on because it would be their like the Masonic Lodge, his old business partners, and people like that. So what he did is what any up-and-coming emperor would do. So he approached a friend of his who worked at a printing press and made his own currency that was legitimately honored as a real currency within San Francisco.
Bullshit.
You could buy 50 cents of Norton bucks for $10, which is like $200 now. So like they were expensive. And he would charge like 7% interest.
So I could go to the sandwich shop and say, "Here's 25 Norton cents. Give me one of those Friscos." And then I give him $25 more.
And then you get beaten in the street. Well, you get one chance when you say Frisco to get warned about it, but God help you if you do it again. But yes, you legitimately could. People treated it as such, because remember, currency only has value that we assign to it. Why do people want gold? Shiny, and it doesn't rust. Like, there's no actual purpose to care about gold other than those things.
But
So,
okay. I have to ask another question. Hold on, I gotta get more involved here. Okay, so how big is this following that he can have a currency? How many people has he got? Like an estimate.
all right, let me put it this way. If a politician was ever quoted as saying, that Emperor Norton, he's a crazy guy, committed political suicide. The entire city was behind Emperor Norton.
So the entire city of San Francisco knew about this guy and liked this guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Norton was making a lot of really good points.
Wait, hold on.
200 years ahead of his time.
Okay, an actual time traveler. But I have a question. How many people in power were listening to all of his crazy rules?
Some, to the extent where the most impact he had was some of his more basic ones would get a lot of support, and he would influence like a large amount of people to back that. The only big name, like, this is an actual like thing, was when they added that law to pay for his clothing and his food and shit later in his life. But besides that, there's a bunch of like middle stuff that I'll get into that like he was able to get into. But fun fact about him, right next door to his boarding house was the Morning Call newspaper, who had a young employee. I don't know, this guy's kind of underground. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name was Mark Twain.
Wait, what?
So Mark Twain was his neighbor, and he was a legit admirer of Norton. Like, he was a big fan. Like, he was a friend to the guy. Did you ever read Huckleberry Finn?
No, actually, I don't think I have.
There's a character in Huckleberry Finn called the King, and it is based on Emperor Norton's mannerisms with how he acted. I think the King in Huckleberry Finn is a bad guy, though. So, I mean, some of the other things Norton would get, besides free meals, statues are made in his image as, like, souvenirs. Plays were written about him, and the front row seats were saved for him and his accomplices, which we'll get to those in a second. And then, when his uniform and all that got damaged, the city board of supervisors, set aside part of their yearly budget just for him. There was an incident in 1867 when someone called the police on Norton to have him arrested for vagrancy, which is being homeless or mentally unstable, and the papers were furious. So the Bulletin is one of those papers, and this is what their article said. And what can only be described as the most dastardly of errors, Joshua A. Norton was arrested today. He's being held with a ludicrous charge of lunacy. Known and loved by all true San Franciscans as Emperor Norton, this kindly monarch of Montgomery Street is less a lunatic than those who have engineered these trumped-up charges. As they will learn, His Majesty's loyal subjects are fully appraised of this outrage.
His loyal subjects. Every true San Franciscan loves this guy. What the fuck? He's just as a cult.
So they immediately release him. The police chief gives an apology, a public project, whatever, he's immediately released. And the first thing Norton does is he turns right around and pardons the police for their error in judgment.
What? I imagine the crowd just went wild when they were watching that.
He would write letters to Lincoln, the Tsar of Russia, and Queen Victoria. None of them ever responded, but he would write letters to them, constantly. Even outside of San Francisco, people were digging this dude. So he would go to Sacramento a lot, which is the state capital.
I just want to interject. All this guy is doing is running around in this beaver hat saying hey guys, we should be nice to other people. We should treat other humans as human beings, and we should actually have taxes. Yeah! Whoa! This guy's got it! Yeah!
Gary, that's exactly what it is. So, on one of his trips to Sacramento, when he was going to study and make sure that his state was running well at the Capitol, he was on a train, and he paid this waiter in his Imperial currency, and the guy refused to take it. Norton pitched Gasp. Norton pitched a huge fucking fit. So much that the conductor got off of the got off of the controls and went back there, and he was apologizing profusely to the emperor. And then the next day, he was given free rides on Central Pacific trains for the rest of his life.
What?
They offended the emperor, Alex.
They offended the emperor. He was just saying shit, and they all just love him. He's a charisma build.
He's kind of like a modern Diogenes, right?
I was thinking about that.
He's like Diogenes, but he's also like kind of like FK from the Dido games. Because this dude, he's relatable. He was always on the ground floor of issues impacting the everyday man. Like, politicians would talk with him, and he would know, a week before it hit the papers, hey, this is a problem. This needs to be fixed. This is what we're dealing with. When someone did him a good deed, he would do something to pay them back. Like, if someone helped him out, he would, give them acknowledgments in his courts, or some of his own currency, or just like a simple handshake from the emperor, and like pose for like a photo and shit.
All right.
But he would save his greatest boon. I swear to God, this is real. His greatest boon he would give to children or people that really needed cheering up, which is he would crown them king or queen for a day and treat them as the king of the empire.
What?
And he would tell them, like, hey, this 6-year-old kid, he is the he is the emperor of the United States of America, and you will give him that respect. And he'll give him like the hat.
I was just about to ask, does he give him the fucking hat?
So it's great. I'm hopping into the future here, but in 1964, the first openly gay person to run for public office was a drag queen who named himself Empress of San Francisco Jose the Widow Norton. And they are buried right next to his grave plot.
What?
So, like, the 1800s fucking sucked, right? Like, I think people like this dude because he was just a fun, positive character. Like, you've got the actual city could be really fucking mean. If you're down on your luck, one of the only good things in your life was, hey, there's Norton getting up to his shenanigans. Look at him go.
You're all sad, sitting there, huddled and crying. You look up. There's like a heavenly light. There's a guy in a beaver hat. He hands it to you. Here you go, kiddo. You're the emperor for a day. He winks at you. You look down at the hat. You look back up. He like slowly fades away.
He's like fucking Willy Wonka.
He is literally just Taddy's a time traveler. We were talking about time travel already with Adolf Sachs. This is one of the good ones. The guy who time travels, like, there are evil people like Reverse Flash who try to fuck up Adolf Sachs's life. Then there's this guy, Norton here. He's one of the people who time travel just to help others.
So, we know a lot about Emperor Norton now, don't we, Alex?
Yes.
Let me tell you about his Yamcha rival and his 2 dog companions.
He has a rival?
Yes, he has a rival. So what I had just now, that was kind of the end. I had like another paragraph or whatever, but that was kind of the end of the Emperor Norton story. And then I saw a single fucking line that mentioned that Dr. Willie Coombs was his rival. I'm like, who the fuck is this? So Frederick Coombs, also known as Willie Coombs, also known as George Washington II.
Okay.
So he had a rival in the streets of San Francisco, which was this pudgy, horny old man who called himself George Washington II. So this dude is like the opposite. Like, he is the Reverse Flash. So he was a phrenologist who turned into a crazy person. Phrenology is the study of like bumps on your skull to figure out personality traits and health. Do you remember in Django Unchained when Leonardo DiCaprio had that old slave skull? Yeah. And he cracked it open with a hammer?
Yes, actually. Yeah.
He was like measuring it and doing that. Where he's talking about the Negroes got a bump on their skull here. That's what phrenology is. It's total horseshit.
I was about to say
complete nonsense.
So it's just pseudoscience.
Pseudoscience?
Pseudoscience. Listen, I fucked up. All right. I corrected myself. Also, fun fact, did you know it's called macabre and not macabre? I was saying macabre for like 25 years.
I can't believe the story you're telling me. It's macabre. So, this dude he was born in London, moved to New York, or not New York, I think it was Chicago. But he headed west to hit San Francisco in a traveling carnival doing medicine shows alongside a giant and a dwarf.
Oh, so he was total bullshit. This fucking George Washington II guy.
Yeah, he would like measure, I assume, like measure the skulls of the two and be like, look at this man's skull is bigger, therefore he is a giant. And then everyone would, all the slack jawed yokels would, woo, Gary, Gary,
whoa,
Gary.
Yeah,
He says what we're thinking. He gets to San Francisco and he's normal for a bit. He's doing solo tours around fancy clubs and mansions, giving phrenology demonstrations for like the really bored aristocrats.
Yeah, they just spend their money on fucking anything back in the 1800s, wouldn't they?
So the high society people kept telling him that he looked a lot like George Washington.
Oh, god damn it.
So he did what any sane person would do. He started marching down the streets in town in full uniform with a tricorn hat, with a sign that said he was the great matrimonial candidate and calling himself George Washington II.
Okay, so I imagine he doesn't have nearly as big as a following, though, as the Emperor, right?
He does not, because this guy was just horny. Like, he was just a creepy old horny man. So, some of the greatest hits that Washington did. So, he wrote a book on phrenology. He actually wrote 2 books. He traveled to Chicago and back on foot with that traveling circus. He billed the U.S. Congress $17 quadrillion to recoup money that he spent improving the nation. Accounting for inflation, that is $460 quadrillion, and the U.S. produces in 2020 $20 trillion as their gross domestic product. So I'm gonna doubt that one. The other book he wrote is The Dawn of the Millennium! Splendid discovery! A beautiful plan to give every man, and woman also, a nice house and lot, comma, and a nice little wife or a husband for all.
What?
I have no fucking clue what that book is.
And a husband or wife for all! Exclamation. It sounds like a fucking robot, like making those automated messages on like a fucking clickbait title. Like one of those shitty videos.
Not clickbait, real. So Washington was kind of a prick, but I'll get to him again. I'll loop it back around to him. But I want to talk about the 2 dog companions, which are Bummer and Lazarus.
Okay.
So Alex, in the 1800s, there was a big problem with large cities. And that problem is that often 2 to 1, there were a shitload of stray and feral dogs in the city.
Oh.
There were so many dogs that just to survive, we had to go kind of full China on them.
Oh no.
But in San Francisco, outside of a saloon, there was this black and white Newfoundland dog named Bummer. Newfoundlands are like they're very cute dogs. I don't know how else to describe it. Like I googled it, I was like, oh, look at that little fucker. So what he did was that he sat outside the saloon, and turns out he was really good at catching rats. Like really good.
The dog or the dog or the Emperor?
Yeah. So he would catch rats, and the old dog that they had that wasn't good at catching rats, I guess they just killed with strychnine. So the 1800s is kind of fucked up.
Ugh.
So they kept him around, and they would feed him, scraps from the saloon. People would go out to the alleyway, they give him food and shit. And he's chilling there for a while, and there's this other dog that got into a fight with this big old bulldog. The smaller dog's got like a huge bite in his leg, like it's gouged open. He gets his shit kicked in. And Bummer unexpectedly saves him and starts taking care of this smaller dog. Like, he starts defending him and giving him food scraps and shit.
Alright.
And this other dog now is named Lazarus. So the press loved these dudes. If Norton wasn't doing anything interesting that day, then the news is just full of Bummer and Lazarus getting up to their adventures. They were so good at catching rats, they could kill 85 rats in 20 minutes. That is 4.25 rats a minute. That is a rat every 15 seconds. That's a lot of fucking rats.
How can cats even compete?
I want to know how they got that. Like, did they set up like a little... Because remember, this is back when, like, life sucked, so you just had to find things to do. Like, they didn't have fucking Fortnite yet.
They didn't have TV
So-
or the internet. They had to just go outside and look for dogs killing smaller animals.
I imagine what they did was, like, they just set up this arena, and then they had, like, Dirty Larry have, like, a potato sack full of 85 rats, and they just dumped them in there and opened the gate like a rodeo, and just, like, had, like, a little, like, watch counter that they use, like, tick, 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 to watch and kill the rats. I don't know. Listen, the 1800s were whack. So, in the news, they personified these dogs. They made Bummer a gentleman down on his luck, yet still faithful and conscientious, while Lazarus the mongrel was cast in the role of the sly and self-serving fair-weather friend.
What?
So Lazarus was like Lazarus was you and Bummer was me.
Okay.
So Bummer was shot in the leg at some point,
Aw.
and Lazarus left to go hang out with another dog. And the press went nuts with that. And they like wrote these long stories about how Bummer was like sad and like sitting in the alleyway. And after a few months, Lazarus came back, and then the newspaper for like 3 days was just full of these stories of them having their heroic reunion and shit. So 1862.
And the press went nuts with that. This dog left and then came back, and the press went wild.
Dog friends. Honestly, I mean, if you saw that shit on Insta, I'd like it, or whatever you do on Instagram. Can you reblog things? I've never used Instagram because I'm not 13. Or a ped. So in 1862, Alex, there's this new hot shot loose cannon dog catcher. He thinks he's hot shit. Like, Alex, do you remember the guy from Trailer Park Boys, Cyrus?
Yes.
So you got Cyrus from Trailer Park Boys who pulls up in his car, you know, he hops out with the fucking net and he swoops up Lazarus. And the city goes full mob mode. The board of supervisors like immediately takes the guy and brings him into protective custody.
What?
And then they let the dog go. They're like, we are now passing a law. Bummer and Lazarus are exempt from the stray laws and protected citizens of the city.
What?
And Emperor Norton would, like, every now and then he would hang out with the dogs, and he considered them, like, guardians of his empire and shit. So, 1 year later, tragedy strikes.
Oh no.
One of the city fire engine horses kicks Lazarus, and he passes away.
Oh
Like,
no.
he just gets too close, and the horse just baps him, and he's gone. So, you know, they write these long obituaries in the newspaper, and...
I assume they kill the horse, right?
No, they didn't kill the horse,
Okay.
but they're like... Because, I mean, if the horse did... Maybe the horse did it on purpose. Maybe the horse is an evil time traveler disguised as a horse. Maybe it's like Loki. It's like, I'm going to travel back in time and kill this dog and then get fucked. So Bummer is still alive. Lazarus was... they didn't bury him, but they had like a newspaper comic where they had Norton giving a eulogy, and they had George Washington digging the grave, and like Lazarus is in a coffin, and they had like all the current political people like in the strip and shit. I'm sure it was scathing at the time. So Bummer is kind of sad about it, you know. The newspapers kind of stopped giving as much of a shit because he only got the one. At some point, Bummer, Mark Twain wrote this article that Bummer had adopted a small black puppy under his wing and was taking care of it. But for the most part, they were kind of out of the news. And then 3 years after Lazarus died, Bummer was kicked by a drunk and died from his wounds.
So that drunk was then executed for his crimes against America, right?
Almost.
What?
Like, he would have. The city straight up was going to kill the man. Like, people were, like, chasing him through town with, like, pitchforks and shit. Like, old school Frankenstein mob. And the city had to, again, take the guy and bring him into protective custody. And they're like, hey, we're going to capture him. We're going to put him in our cell. You guys can't kill him. He's got to go, you know. This isn't murder. You killed the dog. You know, you can't do this. His cellmate finds out what he did, and he breaks the dude's nose, or as Mark Twain wrote it, popped him in the smeller.
Even what did you say?
What did
do
you
to this
say
dog?
about Bummer?
Brr! Just gets him in the fucking face.
So, both the dogs were stuffed and taxidermied. They were given a home inside of the saloon. And then, you know, they're taxidermied, so like they lasted a really long time, but in 1910 they kind of they incinerated them because they were like getting, you know, gross.
Yeah.
So so that was Bummer and Lazarus. In those playhouses where they would hold like plays for Norton, there would be Norton, Washington, and then Bummer and Lazarus in the front row.
What?
Like, imagine being like a captain of industry and you have to sit next to these two stray dogs and this fat fucking George Washington guy.
And the emperor of the United States, the king of San Francisco.
And the protector of Mexico.
So how does he become the defender of Mexico? I'm very curious, because you didn't mention that.
Well, it was just like a real quick thing. In 1863, Napoleon III invades Mexico to get their silver. And he didn't do anything about it, but he's like, hey, don't fuck with Mexico. And so he just added that to his name, I guess, because he thought it was a gross misuse of power, which most people believed so, because he was just doing... Cause what it was is that Mexico didn't want to pay him money because he was unjustly asking for money. And he knew he couldn't get it through like real means. So he just sent a bunch of people to Mexico to kill them. So a lot of people were very much against it. So, you know, he added that to his name because it was something he really deeply cared about.
So once again, he just said, hey, everybody, widely accepted fucking thing. Woo, yeah!
He's like r/unpopular opinion, where it's only popular opinions. So Washington and Norton were a lot different. Norton was like a reserved common man, while Washington was just a fat, creepy old man. Want to get cucked? Here's my card. George Washington II. So he was pompous and vain, yada, yada, yada. So Washington and Norton became enemies when Washington called the cops on Norton for taking down some posters that Washington put up. I assume they were like creepy ass Christian, like need woman like posters and shit. And he called the cops on him, and Norton wasn't arrested because removing posters is not a crime.
Yeah.
And so the newspaper's like, Washington, why do you think Norton did this to you? And his reasoning was that Norton is jealous of my reputation with the fairer sex.
What?
So they start fighting over this. Norton publishes a notice saying, seize upon the person of Professor Coombs, falsely called Washington II, and have him sent forthwith for his own good and the public good to the state lunatic asylum for 30 days.
Can I just say how funny it is that he's a horny old man and his name is fucking Coombs?
So Coombs, he leaves San Francisco forever after this.
Damn.
Because people sided with Norton. They're like, Washington, you're being a fucking weirdo. Get out of here. So he just left. Like, Washington left the city. He's like, well, I know when I'm not wanted here. And so he left in New York City, where Mark Twain found him again. And he got in trouble because, you know the cartoon thing? If someone's on the highway and they're hitchhiking, and they like hock their leg up and have their knee out?
Yeah.
That's what Washington was doing.
What?
And then he got in trouble for it. And Mark Twain wrote an article about it. So he fucked off to New York City and was being a creep until he died. That's what happened to Washington.
And then he died. The end.
So, Emperor Norton, you know, everyone loves him. He's fucking great. Thursday, January 8th, 1880. It's always a good sign when I have a very specific date. So he's walking to attend his monthly debate at the Hastings Society for the Academy of Natural Sciences. Like, this is a big boy thing. When right across the street, he has a heart attack.
Oh, no.
Next day, he's declared dead, and the city mourned. 10,000 people showed up to his funeral.
What?
The dude that bought the water lots that his old business was through, it was like the San Francisco Electric Gas Company, paid for his rosewood casket and the procession and everything. You had people that were like the mayor of the city all the way down to like street beggars and like labormen and everyone in between all came out to his funeral. And much later in 1934, they had to move his grave for a project, and they gave him full civic and military honors
There's
and
the
like this
boomer.
really extravagant headstone. So, what was up with Norton? Um, the easy one is to say, oh, he's a high functioning schizophrenic, but I don't think that's what it is. At the time, that's what people thought it was. But the theory I saw that made the most sense is that so he lost everything multiple times. In that time where he lost both his parents and his siblings, that time he lost all of his father's money and fucking put him into ruin. And then again, when he made a single mistake and he fucking lost everything, and then he was just gone for 4 years. What I think it was and well, but I agree with what someone think it was because this wasn't my article I wrote.
Yeah.
He thinks that he withdrew into a severe depression. Makes sense. When he came out of it, the first thing he did was he had this. I think it's a heuristic. I think that's the proper word. A heuristic persona, which is like a stage personality that he was putting out there to kind of separate himself so that he could kind of get through these emotions. And then it turned out people really, really liked that stage persona. And so it just kept fueling his fire. And he leaned further and further into it because when he was Joshua Norton, no one really cared. Like he had friends still. Like he was still, people checked in on him every now and then, but as Emperor Norton, he was given respect, he was given free food, he was given free accommodations, he was able to make a living, he was selling his bills. So he had to keep it going until it kind of really became what he actually was.
No one cared who he was until he put on the beaver hat.
Exactly. He's like an avatar of positivity and forward thinking. Like he's a weird goofball like Don Quixote, the dude with the lance riding the donkey.
Yeah.
Every town in America and across the world probably has like those weird kooky people in it, those characters. So his stories, it's relatable. It's something that everyone has. Oh, this weird guy that lives in town is kind of like that, but probably less chivalrous. So I'm glad that viewer suggestion came to me because this guy was really fun. So you can find the podcast here on YouTube.
We're always
iTunes,
so
Google
bad
Play.
with the endings.
No, I have an ending bit. Don't worry.
What?
You can find the podcast on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Discord, and Patreon in the description here. I have two last notes about Norton. In the census, so this is all the way up to like actual government.
All right.
His name and occupation was Emperor Norton. It wasn't Joshua Norton homeless. It was Emperor Norton, Emperor of the United States, Protector of Mexico.
What? They actually officially put that on documents?
Yes. And then the thing I want to say at the very last thing, unless you have anything else to say, because I have something I'm going to close this out on. I have a very hopeful note.
Go on.
But I want to know if you have anything you want to say about him.
It's all you, baby. You got this episode in the bag.
So, in 1999, a spirit medium said they contacted Joshua Norton beyond the grave. And he said, I shit you not, that his empire extends to the internet.
What?
So I hope Emperor Norton, Protector of the United States, or Emperor Norton, I hope he's looking down at this podcast fairly, and that we are doing him a service. So, shout out to you, Norton. Keep doing it, baby. Okay, Alex. I really can't think of an ending, so I'm just gonna say again, thanks for listening and bye.